add interest, vibrancy, etc. to any videos that you produce. So first of all, what is tabletop animation? So I have heard this phrase used before, but I've kind of reinvented it for my own purposes, if you like, because I don't think there is a fixed definition. So I'm calling tabletop animation a DIY technique where you have a fixed camera and move elements underneath it. So we might think of animation as being stop frame animation, but actually a lot of this technique is a lot easier than that, because you can use your hands to actually manipulate things and move them around. So you don't need to take those two frames and add them all together in the same way as animation is done professionally in studios. So let me show you, these are the things that I use to make tabletop animation at home. And I've prepared a video about how I use them and the different possibilities from tabletop animation, which I'll show you in a moment. But if you look here, you'll see there's a phone, a mini tripod, and some tape. And perhaps what might surprise you is I do all my filmmaking using my rather old iPhone. And basically I tape it to a chair that's lost its back in my bedroom. And that's how I do it. So let me show you the film now. It's about 2 minutes. And later on in this session, what we'll do is I'll talk a little bit more about tabletop animation. We'll view a couple of clips of different animations. They're 2 minutes each and there's 2 of them. And then for the last 20 minutes, we'll do an exercise where you can think together about how you might develop a tabletop animation in response to a brief that I'll give you for the activity. So first of all, here's the video about making. And if people have trouble with the sound or anything like that, please flag it up and I'll start it again. I don't want you to be sitting there not able to see or hear, although in this video actually it's a music track. Okay, here we go. I hope this works. So all you need to do tabletop animation is your phone, some objects, paper, printouts, anything that you can find at home, plus some music or a voice over track. Now, let me just share my screen again. Okay, so what's the point of all of this other than having fun at home, messing around with bits of paper as I did with my son to make that video? For a start, we know that visual storytelling is really engaging for an audience, and using video is an incredibly powerful medium for storytelling. So when we're thinking about impact, video is a brilliant thing to use. For the audience too, it's fun to watch and a bit different. And at the moment, there's quite a fashion for a kind of more handmade aesthetic rather than using computer generated and automated processes. You can play around and your enjoyment in doing it actually comes across to the audience as well. And the other thing is that short little snippets of animation will really suit social media because you've got vibrant and clear and blocky images that will come across well on a small phone screen. And then what's in it for you to bother with doing this? One thing is you can do it yourself, so it's really cheap. You can make it at home, so it's something you can do while we're in lockdown. Another factor is you can tell whatever story you want. So one thing that I've used this technique for quite a bit is making fictional case study videos. And you'll see an example of one of them in a moment. So you can, instead of relying on interviewing people to tell your story, you can write a script, a voiceover, and then fit the images to that. So you can direct that story in whatever direction you want it to go. And then the other thing is I have a lot of fun doing it. I hope that comes through on what I show you, but hopefully it's a fun thing to do as well. And you can do it with service users or beneficiaries, handing over editorial control to them and also control of the visuals. Because it's so low tech and just relies on having your phone stuck to a stool or on a tripod or whatever, but having a fixed phone, it's something you can really easily engage all sorts of groups of people with doing. Okay, so here's a couple of examples of things that I've made. So the first one uses writing in a book. I'll show them to you and then I can talk a little bit about where they came from. So this is a 2-minute clip. Oh, sorry, I did the wrong thing. Hang on, play.
When you need board members for your charity, you might often ask the people you know, your peers, to help. But recruiting this way means everyone will look like you. Your network won't have all the skills you need. You might hit bumps in the road that would be easier to deal with if only you had the right skills. And you need people who really want to commit to a role of a trustee, not just people who want to do you a favour. So before you go to your network and recruit a trustee, it's time you carried out a skills audit and worked out what you need.
You're a small charity. Let's name you. You can make music. You work with offenders to bring music into their lives in prison. In group sessions, they can write, play and record music, supported by mentors. It's a creative relief from the everyday routine, but so much more. In a non-judgmental space, everyone can explore ideas, feelings, experiences, and express themselves. Over time, they build relationships. They learn that making mistakes is okay. From small successes in music comes the confidence and determination to achieve in other things.
Okay, so we saw two examples there. Let me just stop sharing. So we saw two examples there. The first was from a second-tier organisation, Reach Volunteering, who help put volunteers in touch with people who need volunteers. So that was a film that actually two members of staff made themselves with my help. We were learning together, so you could see some of it was a little bit wobbly, and that's because we hadn't fixed the phone down properly. But I think that use of a book is a really interesting way to tell a story, because as you turn the pages, it's a device that moves us on to the next thing that you want to say. The second one I actually made for a project that Superhighways was involved in. And that's an example of this being able to create a case study that suits your purposes. And that case study, in the film, it went on then to talk about theory of change and apply it to that case study. So the things which video is good for, telling stories, using this technique, you can make your own stories and tell them visually. So I'll just share my screen again. If you want to use this technique, a useful way to think through your ideas is to use this format, and there's an example here. So I call it a 2-column script format, and basically you have what you hear on one side and what you see on the other. Now, a lot of people like to use storyboarding, where you make sketches to plan out a film. But personally, I use this method instead, partly because I'm not very good at drawing, but also I tend to think more in words, and I know in my mind what building in coloured card is and sign that says TFY says. I don't particularly need to draw that out. But this method of having what you're hearing with what you're seeing put side by side really helps you work out what you're going to do with the animation, and also shows you any holes that you've got where you've got something in the script, but actually you've got no visuals planned to put on screen at the same time as that part of the script. So I would really recommend, if you go down this route, use this method to help you brainstorm and think through what images you want to take. So some more examples. I'll play you this video, and then again afterwards I'll talk you through the examples. These are the last ones we're going to see, and this again is about 2 minutes long.
Imagine you're a small charity promoting public transport. Transport for you. You've got 2 members of staff and a regular group of volunteers. Part of what you do is campaign to the public and the local council. You've got one video on your website. You brought in a company to produce it 3 years ago. It introduces your organisation, but it cost £4,000.
We had a database where it was very easy to input information, but it wasn't always so easy to get it back out in the way that we wanted. And one of the things that I learnt was how to use pivot tables. We run a youth group on Wednesday evening, which is, well attended, but it is in one part of the borough. And I don't know why, I had a hunch that the 20 or 30 children that were coming were all living in the part of the borough which was geographically close to the youth club centre.
I come from Shiraz, Iran. I practiced calligraphy for 25 years. I acted in the theater for 10 years and was on TV in Shiraz. I directed film with my brother that would be put into the cinema. I was the #1 chess player in Iran for a year. but the police began to look for me and my parents, so I went to a church near my house for 4 days.
Okay, so I'll just tell you a little bit about these projects. So this first one is another fictional charity that I can talk about using this technique. And this is for a training course which uses a fictional charity in a whole series of, animated sections to show, to talk about low budget filmmaking and all sorts of different techniques. So this one particularly shows you where you can use animated words that I think is quite effective. So,
campaign to the public and the local council.
oh, sorry, I've done the wrong thing again. Sorry about this. Let me just find that bit, there we go. So I think you can see how just using very simple cutouts can be quite effective. But also I wanted to show you this one because the sound effects are quite important. And having some sound effects in there really, really brings the animation to life. This one I wanted to show you with Alice because it uses little snippets of this animation, as in here, to mix with other kinds of footage to tell the story. So say you're making a video and you've got an interview and it talks about something that you cannot take shots of, or you don't have the resources to go and take shots of, you can use this technique to illustrate an interview-based video. You don't have to make the whole video using this technique. So if we just watch that moment again.
That the 20 or 30 children that were coming were all living in the part of the borough which was geographic.
And the way I make those pictures appear is I just take one long shot and I put each picture in one at a time, and then I cut out all the bits of my hands, just leaving the pictures there, and that's how they appear. If we look at the third clip, I included this one because this is using this animation technique both to empower people and also to get over an issue where those people need to be kept anonymous. So this was a project working with refugees in Lewisham to help them tell their own stories. So how we worked this was I brought a number of resources to an office, and then in that office, the men who were involved in the project could choose what they wanted from all the pictures. I brought the pens, the scissors, the paper. They could draw, write, colour in, cut out, however they wanted to express their own story. So this can also be used as a tool to help people tell their own stories and put that editorial into their control whilst allowing them to be anonymous. So one thing I would just add before the activity is, hopefully it's come across that this is pretty easy technique to shoot at home. However, editing is a little bit more difficult. So my advice to you would be to start small. If you're going to try this technique, just don't embark on a 3-minute continuous animation to begin with. Just try something with 2 shots, possibly dropped into an interview like the clip I showed you. And possibly, if you have anybody in the organisation who's done a little bit of editing before, get them on side and get them to help with the editing. Because you'll see in all those clips, I've changed the speed, I've cut out sometimes where my hands are, that kind of thing. So it's not hugely difficult to do, but it does require ideally somebody who's done a little bit of editing before. Let's take 10 minutes to do an activity. So either you're a food bank and want to communicate where your supplies come from and who receives them, or you're a community venue launching a fundraising campaign to install a lift for accessibility reasons. when you're in your breakout room, I want you to think, what resources are you going to use and how are you going to tell that story? So, for example, the resources in that first film, you can use coloured silhouettes, you can use print-offs from the internet, you can use objects that you place under the camera, you can use a book, you can use post-it notes, you can mix it with an interview. Those are the options open to you. And when it comes to telling the story, what of those techniques are you going to choose, and what are you going to tell that story as a case study through one person? Are you going to tell it in a general way? How are you going to do that? Are you going to use music and text on screen, or are you going to use a voiceover? So if you just go into your breakout rooms and think about that for 10 minutes and come back, and then just for half a minute each, we'll share what ideas we've come up with, and we can then have a little think through about how you might go ahead and make them.
Yeah, we were discussing different aspects. So with the food bank, for example,
Yeah,
where food comes from, the sort of people that go to food banks, how they've ended up there, the people that work there, and we would use things like stick figures, faces painted onto spoons, sock people, nice. And then also photos of places. So the hall where the food bank is, say with the lift one, and the second option, so the ground floor, that's where the people start, but they want to get up to the top floor. So how do they get from there to there? These are the scary stairs. So using printouts of photos, and then
that sounds good.
Putting people on top of that, or you stick figures, or
I really like the idea of stick figures and faces painted on spoons, because the faces painted on spoons are kind of to do with food, and also they give you a kind of character, an identity, a personality to look at, but without tying that to a specific kind of person. So they can be anonymous, but also have personality at the same time. And I think that's one thing that this technique offers you, really.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Should we move on to the second room?
Great one. So we had no one in room 2. There was room 3. Hilary from St Michael's Fellowship, Ivana, no, and Mark. Who's going to feed back for room 3? Don't all shout out at once. Come on. All right, I'll have to make a decision. All right, Ivana, you're just below me in the list of video feeds. So
yeah, I'm sorry.
For a long way.
Yeah, I wasn't there because I ended up in a different room on my own, so I had to leave and join the other group.
Oh no!
Yeah,
I can do it.
Oh, how awful! I'm so sorry.
I was left out of
We've
it.
got Lorna's get to do it.
Yeah, that's fine because I took notes and I was in there too. So so that was really we chose the lift one.
Yeah.
And initially just saying the problem, community centre is a great place to go, but 10% of people or whatever it is cannot get there. That's a standard voiceover. Picture of the building, probably a photograph with a lift going up, maybe you'd pan up. And what was it was felt that we should show the different groups of people who are having difficulty accessing it. So that would be 3 main groups came up. One would be older people, parents with babies, and people with mobility issues, challenges, and it was important to actually show them. So then moving on to the solutions, saying that we want to create a lift and how much fundraising campaign, how much that would cost. And
did you decide what sort of materials you're going to use on?
Oh, sorry, yes, we didn't, but can I no, we hadn't decided whether that would be photographic cutout or you know, sort of as abstract as you've done it before.
Yeah, I mean, I think for this one, the silhouettes technique would work quite well, because you've got different silhouettes for different groups. And again, you're giving them personality by choosing shapes and colours, but you're not identifying specific people. The other way you could do this one is maybe by focusing on three individuals and showing how they have difficulties, and then showing what a lift would offer them. And you can use a lot of movement in this one, which is partly why I chose it, because you've got all the going up and down that you can play with under the camera by moving images with your hand. Yeah, thank you very much. Should we go on to the next room?
Right, this is room 4 with Mary, Pat and Rosie. Who's going to feedback?
We hadn't actually decided. But I'm quite happy to pitch in.
Good. We've got 5 minutes, so we'll have to crack on. Please carry on.
Do you want me to go ahead? We were talking about the food bank.
Yeah.
So our vision was to give it to the voice of a client. So we thought it's slightly emotive, but maybe have a child, and it's sort of starting with an opening, well, a picture of a cupboard, a cutout or a drawing of the cupboard that's
right,
empty,
yeah,
and then the food appearing in it, bing, 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 and then the child, and there may be a stats talking about how normal that is for families. Child talking about the reasons why they use the food bank, so maybe daddy lost his job or something, really normal. And then the child just asking, but where does the food come from? Big question mark appears. And then we go on a journey with the child to a map of the borough, which shows the donation points, and a little van that brooms across the map collecting.
Oh, that sounds
food.
lovely.
And then you get to the cutout of the food bank, and people going in, including the child from the beginning with their mum or dad or whoever, going and collecting the food, and then the child saying thank you, and then maybe a big thank you appears, and all around are all the people who use the food bank, to totally normalise that there's loads of people using it and how many people benefit. So bing, 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 lots of people saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And if we'd had more time, we probably would have talked about maybe adding more stats and a bit more maybe client voices and things like that.
I think that sounds really great, really good idea. And also, obviously, because you're just using the child's voice and not showing them, then all those ethical issues are well, most of them, although there may be an ethical issue about using their voice, but because you're not showing them visually, that overcomes a lot of the safeguarding and ethical problems there. I think that sounds wonderful, and I like the way you're telling the story visually with the food popping up in the cupboard, so that you need to use less words and you can focus on the child's voice because you're visually explaining what's happening, so you don't need to do that in words, and you can save the words mostly for the child. I think that's really good visual storytelling. The other thing with the food bank is you can actually use physical cans of food as well as images of them under the camera. So you could think about playing around with actually objects under the camera with
Kat
that.
had a really nice idea about a plate with food appearing on it, which I think.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much. Is there another group?
There is indeed. Room 5, 2 Sallys in room 5, Sally Ward and Sally Mollet, Stephanie and Tara, sorry. Who's going to feedback?
I will, because it was kind of based around my charity, I have to say.
Sally.
And an issue we have had going on. It's not a community centre. The issue we have is it's actually a big shopping centre in Hounslow,
right,
which doesn't have a public lift in. Basically, to go upstairs, there's a theatre on the top floor, which we use a lot, and you have to go into Debenhams to get in a lift. So what the idea was that we'd actually use our members, our learning disabled members, cut photos out of them. One in particular, who's a wheelchair user, who's very expressive, and meeting her friends at the ground floor.
Yeah.
And then watching them get the escalator up. And then she's sitting there thinking, how am I going to get up there? Obviously, her expression, how am I going to get up there?
A thought bubble. We said we'd have a thought bubble.
Yeah, thought bubble,
yeah. So 3 or 4 thought bubbles on how am I going to get up there, with the last one being the lift.
Yeah,
that makes the sense, you know, all these different ways they try and get her up, but really what we need is a lift.
We thought we'd try funny things like beam me up, Scotty, and flying up and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great idea, because the advantage of using thought and speech bubbles is that you can then make your video to music, which A, makes it easier to edit, and B, means that it's really suitable for social media, because sometimes people aren't listening to the sound. Sometimes you want to make a video that people can watch in the bus when they haven't got headphones with the sound down. And I like the way you're telling the story completely visually through those thought and speech bubbles. And again, I think that's a lovely idea about actually taking photos of the real people and then cutting them out. That's a technique that I've used before. So I got my son to photograph my head at lots of different angles, and then I could cut my head out and put it onto whatever I wanted. Obviously you wouldn't be doing that, but it makes your production process for that person who you are filming a lot easier, because all you need to do is spend 10 minutes taking photos of them. Doesn't matter what the background is, and then you can use those photos at home to develop the story. You don't need to take them out on location. It's not too much of a put out for them to take part, which is always an advantage.